Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 8 of Crunch Time Crossover. Again, you know your host. My name is Isaac. Happy to be back. First week of February down. Again, it feels like these months never slow down, honestly. So it's good to be back. Just going to recap the last week of basketball, some updates, just some things to note for sure. Western Conference. We have Utah still playing some of the best basketball I've seen, honestly, all season. 19-5. I think they've won 18 out of those last 20 games that they've played as well too. So definitely been playing pretty top tier. Donovan Mitchell has definitely separated himself of being one of the top 3 to top 5 shooting guards in this league right now, depending on who you ask. So the only question I have for them is if they're going to be able to keep that up. Going into postseason. They've already played a total of 24 games, and again, it is a 72-game season. So as long as they can keep it up, stay in that 1 seed, they might be doing all right heading into postseason basketball. Another interesting thing going on in the West, the Grizzlies, just like that, they were 5th seed last time we talked, but went from 5th now down to the 11th seed. Looks like they ended up losing 3 games in a row while only winning 1 game out of the last 4. So, and that's just kind of going to be the narrative for the West, is just those games really matter, and again, they went from 5th seed fairly comfortably all the way down to out of actually the playoff contention. So, again, I was surprised that they were there. Seeing them drop down isn't really surprising to me at this point. Again, they're still a pretty young team. It's just too much talent and firepower in the Western Conference. Another team, I spoke a little bit about one of the players on this team, but Sacramento's been having a pretty steady and consistent season. I think a conversation that should be had as well, is De'Aaron Fox up for most improved. He's been really balling, and again, that rookie on their team, Tyrese Halliburton, I think is going to be the maybe not first or second in the Rookie of the Year votes, but definitely third. He's been playing really, really well, averaging 12 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds for a rookie. And I think he's been playing a little under 20 minutes. So, that's pretty impressive basketball in my opinion. De'Aaron Fox, who's one of my favorite guards in the league. I definitely liked watching him play in Kentucky out in college, but he's been putting up 23 points, close to 6.5 assists, and he's also been shooting 48% from the 3-point, which has been his the lowest, or not the lowest, but had been one of the most important things in his offense was kind of lacking a 3-point shot. So he's definitely been doing that. In my opinion, he needs to be getting to the free throw line a little bit more. He's only averaging 6 attempts per game, which is, I think as a guard, you definitely need to be getting to the line a little bit more because free throws are honestly just like little freebies. So yeah, there was I will talk about it a little bit later going on the East, but Harrison Barnes has been playing pretty good for Sacramento as well too. And I've actually heard his name come up in a couple articles about potentially getting moved around. So I don't know who really fills that role for Sacramento, but I think if they can get a really good piece in return for him, I think that might end up be worth not having Harrison Barnes on that roster. I think one of the most surprising games of last week that I saw was watching the Portland Trailblazers actually beat the 76ers without CJ McCollum, without Dame, and without Jusuf Nurkic. Melo ended up having a really good game, putting up 22 points. He had 5 rebounds and 4 assists. And he's also in the ballot for the All-Star votes as well, which is really nice. I think the only thing that's been maybe not the issue with Portland, but is if they have enough, to win a chip. I see a team with 2 All-Stars in CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. And again, some pretty good depth all the way down their roster. It's just, I don't know if that's enough to, close out a team late in the postseason. I remember when the Lakers and the Trailblazers played in the bubble last year, the whole conversation of Portland might be able to beat them. Portland's going to do this and do this. And then the Lakers just handled them for the remainder of that series. Forgive me. So, that's a big win for them, especially without that all-star talent, which just, I think, kind of adds to that repertoire of that team is really dangerous. And they beat Philadelphia. And again, Philly's been number one in the East for pretty much the entirety of the season so far. So pretty big win. Stephen Curry had another career night, put up 57 points. He hit 11 threes, but they ended up losing to Luka's Mavericks. Luka put up 42 and 11 the other night. I think the Warriors are still going to be a contending team all season. They're at a record of 12 and 11. Going down to the Mavericks, surprisingly, the Mavericks are 14th in the West. And granted, there's 3 teams that are tied with 10 wins apiece with the New Orleans Pelicans and then Oklahoma City Thunder. But the Mavericks have lost more games than them with 14 losses compared to the Pelicans and Thunder's 12. So I think that's just been really, really surprising. I think Luka's had after the outing that Luka had in the bubble, it is kind of surprising to see not just him not play to his caliber, but just to see the overall Dallas team. I think they're a team that didn't really do much in the offseason and actually ended up losing a couple pieces as well. So, they're not too far down from getting into that playoff spot with how close the that bottom half of the West is, but they're not going to have much time to kind of figure that out, in my opinion. Again, just to speak on the Lakers, just because they're always going to be a topic of conversation. Right now, they're second in the West at 18-6. They came off of a double overtime win against one of the worst teams in the league the other night against the Pistons. But those games ultimately are just kind of learning curves for them. Those games don't really mean anything to that kind of talent. But I do know that the Lakers play again tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And AD, Anthony Davis, is actually out with an Achilles injury. So it'll be interesting to see who fills those roles. Ultimately they did pick up Montrezl Harrell in that offseason. So he's, in my opinion, supposed to be the one to kind of fill that heavy power forward minutes. But they still have Kyle Kuzma, and the Lakers definitely have that kind of small ball potential with like talent. LeBron can even play a 4 if need be. So I think it'll be a good game to see a lot of players play. The Thunder aren't doing as good after losing Chris Paul to Phoenix, but again, still a really good team. And as a little bit of a Thunder fan, I do like Shea, SGA out in Oklahoma too, just playing really, really well. But just to note, for the brackets in the West, the Nuggets are at 6th with 12 wins, but from the 6th seed all the way down to the 14th seed, those teams are only separated by 2 games, with the Grizzlies being the exception, being separated by 3. So again, just like the Grizzlies going down 7 seeds in the Western Conference, anything can really happen over the next couple months, especially segueing into the All-Star break, depending on the direction of that. But I just think there's a couple teams here, that could really would really benefit from a trade while the trades are still available. But yeah, I think I'm pleased with the basketball. I think it's just so surprising that Utah has been so consistent. I think that's just the biggest thing, is they're consistently winning pretty big games. And again, only losing 5 games so far out of 24 is definitely not something to overlook anymore at this point. Transitioning over to the Eastern Conference news. Like I had mentioned earlier, Philadelphia is still number 1 at 17-7, but that makes them just the 3rd overall team in the league. But to give credit where it's due, Joel Embiid has scored 30 points in 8 of his last 10 games. And he actually, and I think this is one of the most surprising stats out of his season so far, but he actually leads the league in free throw attempts this season. And that definitely makes a huge difference getting to the line, in my opinion. You win or lose games at the free throw line if it really comes down to it, and he's actually averaging 11 free throw attempts a game, and he's shooting the free throw at 85%. And to add to that, averaging almost 29 points in 10 games 29 points and 10 rebounds a game, that's MVP worthy in my opinion, and I think that definitely changes the narrative of the game. I mean, looking back, they had to make a whole rule to slow down Shaq, and the difference with Shaq is Shaq couldn't hit a free throw. Like when Shaq was at the line, he was maybe hitting 2 or 3 out of 10 attempts, and granted, Shaq was able to still dominate every aspect of the game. If you have a big man that can still do Shaq type things and still knock down free throws, again, that's just a huge problem. And when it comes down to the postseason, especially when it's game on the line, all you have to do is go inside, and I would take Joel Embiid hitting the last 2 free throws of a game if it's for the game or if it's to win the game at this point. So yeah, definitely surprised. I think Doc Rivers ended up being a really good fit at head coach in that Philly team, especially for a Joel Embiid type player. So yeah, good basketball from them. Something really interesting I had spoken about last week was the Boston Celtics and just what I think they kind of needed to really complete them as a team. And I read an article, I want to say a couple days ago, saying that Danny Ainge is actively looking for upgrades for his team. But and to quote him, he said he's looking for shooters with size, which is kind of weird. Like kind of a weird, just looking at the Boston Celtics roster, I would definitely say, in my opinion, that is a very guard heavy team as it is, with some pretty good and consistent shooters. So it's really interesting that, they're kind of shying away from that big man position. They have Tristan Thompson, who they signed going into the season, but he doesn't really fill or he has not maybe. I mean, I don't necessarily know what Brad Stevens, the head coach, is looking for out of him, but I think something that they need, like I said, is just a really good middle presence. And I don't think Tristan Thompson does that very well. He is a big body down there, but there is something about having like a 7-footer and like James Wiseman, for example, or you have like Joel Embiid, or Giannis, that are just really imposing on the inside. But the article was really interesting. They were talking about potential trade options, and like I had said, I had mentioned Harrison Barnes came up in that Boston conversation. And again, Harrison Barnes, that's an NBA champion. He may not be the best shooter there is, but he is definitely like a stretch 3, kind of can play the 4 position and still a pretty good defender. Ultimately, I think his kind of position just takes away minutes from players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, because granted, they're not going to be a part of that trade situation. But I guess the question is if Boston is thinking about moving on from Kemba Walker, just because he hasn't been playing super well. There was other conversation about them potentially trying to acquire Aaron Gordon from Orlando, which, not to say that I don't think Aaron Gordon is a good player, but I think if they're looking for specific talent, and it's especially if it's via trade, I think Boston definitely has a lot of pieces that are worth a little bit more, and I think especially if they were to get an Aaron Gordon type player, his type of game would have to change from the way he plays in Orlando. And not to say I think it would be a bad fit, but I just think there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road with Aaron Gordon being a part of that trade conversation. But the other name that got thrown around, and I think this is actually an interesting point of view, they had mentioned potentially trading for PJ Tucker in Houston, and I think that would be that's exactly what PJ Tucker does. I think PJ Tucker, in my opinion, is one of the more elite 3-and-D options. He's actually at a 10% usage rate with the ball since 2016, which is incredible for a player, to have such an impact on the game while having his usage be so low. But, with that being said, that means he wouldn't really need the ball in his hands, and that would actually give more time for your all-stars, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and potentially if Kemba Walker is still there. So I don't know where PJ is or where he's heads out in Houston, but if Boston could put together a good little package for him, I think that would actually be a really, really good addition. And again, especially if they were to keep Marcus Smart too, that's a really good defensive team now too. And like I said, I think just as soon as they get a big man, I think they'll be all right. But hopefully they'll be in the conversation as far as more trades go. Another team in the East that I just want to speak about, not too much to say, but, I respect the work Indiana, the Pacers have been putting out there. Domantas Sabonis has been playing well all season. The Pacers are 12-12 so far as well, too. And, I think that Indiana team is playing well without Karis LeVert, too. And even though they did lose Victor Oladipo with that James Harden trade, Karis LeVert is pretty much the replacement for that. So that Indiana team didn't really change too much, and I think that team is really, really good as far as their chemistry goes. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of ego on that team. So, if they stay in that position that they're in, I can definitely see Indiana giving some teams nightmare series in the postseason. Because when you have a team there's not a lot of ego involved and there's not a lot of, I need this over this, you just have a team that just really wants to play good basketball. And I think Indiana can definitely do that. Malcolm Brogdon, former rookie of the year, and they have Miles Turner too. Just some good, solid overall basketball. So yeah, I just want to give a little bit of respect to that Indiana team. Some other news that I think is really interesting was Derrick Rose getting sent to the Knicks and playing for Tom Thibodeau again. I think that's really cool. I think Derrick Rose is, in my opinion, probably one of the most respected NBA players that's in the league right now. And man, I just always reminisce of that 2009 MVP season that he had. Just some of the most ridiculous highlights I've ever seen. And, I think because of that, I really wish he would have got traded to like a contending team, or at least a team that's, the Knicks are 8 right now in the West. I mean, the Knicks are 8 in the East right now at 11-14. So they're not out of it, but there's just so much talent in the East that it's hard to even think that they're going to win a series against any of those top 4 teams. So I really, really, really would have wished I saw him go to a contender. But, if New York put something together, they definitely might be all right in the long run. I had spoken about it just a little bit earlier, but, kind of talking about the All-Star game, they did have the first ballot of the returns for the votings. And, a couple notable things, that are pretty interesting. For whatever reason, Klay Thompson made it to the voting, and he hasn't played a game all season. So someone needs to figure that out because, there's a lot of talent at guard, especially in the West, that's capable and it's playing, and I think it's maybe not disrespectful, but it's just a little odd in my opinion, just a little bit odd. But there's definitely a couple of names on here that I think should be a little higher up than a couple of names that are definitely that are not surprising, and leading the West. LeBron James in the front court. You have Nikola at 2, Kawhi Leonard at 3, Anthony Davis at 4, and then Paul George at 5. Pretty stacked, super stacked at the forward position. And then the guards, their top 5 guards are Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic at 2, Damian Lillard at 3, Ja Morant sitting at 4, and then again, like I mentioned in Utah, Donovan Mitchell sitting at 5. And then segueing to the Eastern Conference, I think this Eastern Conference is pretty scary. You have Kevin Durant sitting at the first number 1 in votes, Giannis sitting at 2, Joel Embiid at 3. You can't forget about Jason Tatum at 4, and then Jimmy Butler at 5. Some real talent. There's some dogs on that top 5. And then just some notable mentions, Julius Randle for the Knicks sitting at 8, who should definitely be higher. And the 10th voting on that Eastern Conference front court is Jeremy Grant in Detroit. He ended up signing a pretty big contract away from Denver, and he's been some very productive games. He's just unfortunately signed to the worst team, one of the worst teams in the East. So it is what it is. That sounds like a decision at that point. The guards, though, and I really like this guard feel that's going on in the East, but you have Bradley Beal leading the votes at number 1. You have Kyrie Irving at 2, followed by James Harden at 3. One of my favorite guards in the league, Jaylen Brown, who again has just been playing some terrific basketball, is at 4. And like I mentioned last week, Zach LaVine is actually sitting at 5 in the votes. So I think the one thing that's really interesting about the All-Star voting is just all of the conversation that's been going on about it. There's already been a fair amount of players that have expressed not really feeling about playing in the All-Star game, and I think LeBron was actually the first person to really say something about it, but realistically, LeBron is at this point in time the face of the NBA, so I think whatever he says, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to agree with him, and not only agree with him, but stand behind him, and kind of take the same stance, and I think I saw De'Aaron Fox say something similar too. And, is the All-Star game worth it? I think the voting is great and the accolade is great, saying you made an All-Star team, but the actual practicality of getting them out there in Atlanta for a game and all of the COVID testing protocols, and if they were to do this and let's say someone were to get sick or contract COVID, it's not just one person on a team, it's all of these teams' best players, so that definitely changes the narrative a little bit. Again, I think there'd be some really good, or I think it would be a really good All-Star game if they did play, but I think it's a luxury at this point. I think the league even being able to play right now is more than enough. But, if they want to make it happen, they definitely will. But, I just put together, my opinion, the top 5 players for the starting 5 in the East and the West. So starting with the Eastern Conference, I'm going to say my starting guards, I would probably have James Harden and Bradley Beal. I think those are 2 just guaranteed buckets. And I think it'll be really, in my opinion, Harden can be a point guard, and I think Bradley Beal and Harden would play I think they would have a really, really good dribble handoff. I think they would fill the rotations the same way. And then for my front court is just going to be ordered 1 through 3, Kevin Durant at my small forward, Giannis at my 4, and then Joel Embiid at my 5. That is just a problem for sure. But that Western Conference team doesn't look too bad either. I'd have my guards would be Stephen Curry, and I would definitely take Luka Doncic for my guards. I think I went back and forth with Donovan Mitchell too, but when you think about size-wise, Luka does everything. And then my forwards are pretty much 1 through 3 as well. LeBron at my small forward, Anthony Davis holding down my power forward, and then Nikola Jokic at center. As much as I don't know if the All-Star game would be worth it, I would love to see those teams play. And I think that's the whole conversation is people want to see them play. But, ultimately the question is if it's good for the league. And it's hard to say, I just think that there's a lot at the line, and if people have to miss games, especially your all-stars, I think it just really kills momentum. So if they can do it the right way, it might be worth it. But if it ends up being more of a problem, then, I think it might be best to just scrap this season's all-star game and just let people get named the starters, And then, I just want to name some honorable mentions too if I didn't mention them already, but both Damian Lillard and CJ McConnell are on the all-star voting list, 2 all-star guards on the same team. And I think that just kind of raises my question that I said earlier of what else do they need in order to actually compete for a finals, because I think it's kind of like the Warriors situation, like 2 all-stars with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, and they had the right pieces. So just something to note from them. And then on the Eastern Conference, something to note too, Colin Sexton at 7th votes. Man, I'm a huge Colin Sexton fan. I remember watching his highlights in high school and just laughing. Man, he would clown people in high school. So I'm glad that he's playing well, and that Cleveland Cavaliers team is playing pretty well as well. And then again, at 8th in voting to the man I just mentioned that got traded, Derrick Rose, just off of love and support, just making that all-star game, just pure love and support. So yeah, shout out D Rose, But, Yeah, that's the All-Star game. I looking forward to it if it happens, but if it doesn't, I think that'll just mean that I'm looking forward more to the postseason, and especially that play-in seed 7 through 10 play-in is going to be just definitely worth the watch. But to close this episode out, just things that I'm thinking of, things to share, and I just want to start it off today with 1% better. Just always doing the 1% is always enough. But you just have to get to that 1% in order for it to happen. But it is enough, and over time it will be enough. So it's just something to keep on the forefront of my mind and not to forget about it. Another thing too that I've been really thinking of, is every mistake that you make and that I make and that people make is a lesson if you decide to learn from it. No matter what happens and what you deal with, as long as you take something away from it that helps you or changes an idea or really puts something in perspective, it's a lesson, and we need to learn. Everyone needs to learn at some point. So just not forgetting, even if you mess up, as long as you learn from it, it was worth messing up for. I hope that something good happens to you for today. I hope, and if nothing good happens today, I hope you make something happen for yourself. I hope you can, if you feel like you're missing out on something, I hope you feel like you can make something happen for yourself. Because I think ultimately that's what we need to do sometimes, is we need to hype ourselves up. We have to make things happen. You have to be proactive with your thoughts and your feelings and your actions. So just, I hope something good happens to you today. And if not, I really hope you can make that happen for yourself. Another thing that I've been thinking of, especially as the year progresses, but just checking up on the people in your circle, the people that are around you, the people that you care about. You should check in on them. If they take care of you in some way, you should try your best to take care of them in some way, regardless of what that means to you. I just think that the people around you really do make a difference in the long run, so just making sure that they're good. I'm sure they make sure you're good in separate ways, in different ways, and it's not always, hey, how are you doing? But it's like, are you taking care of yourself, or have you eaten? Have you done this? Have you written today? Just whatever it takes for you to have a good connection with someone in your circle really matters. And I think the last thing I want to share is something that I've been trying to really do every day, but just doing what makes you feel good. Just finding something that you enjoy and finding something that means something to you and something that you care about and just doing it. And getting better at it, and learning about it, and just, you should feel good every day, and you should have things that make you feel good, and you should do things that make you feel good, and you shouldn't forget about things that make you feel good. I think it's hard to do some of these sometimes with the state that things are in, but man, this life is here for us. We have to make it as best as we can, and ultimately I'm in charge of my life, so I have to do what it takes for me to be good. And it's the same for you if you're listening. Whatever it takes for you to be good, I definitely stand behind your decision to do whatever it takes to be good, So be good and stay good. Thank you for lending me your ears for this last half an hour of your time. Looking forward to the next episode. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll hear you guys next week. Peace.